Chapter 2. Independent Alliance, American Confederation Consulate Facility. North Atlanta, Georgia, USA. May 12th, 2176. 2015 hours local time. Andy, would you please just sit your ass down, relax, and get the hell out of my way? There's no way out of this room, and they are watching our every move through this two-way mirror. Big Willie anxiously thumbed at the mirrored wall to his left as he continued to pace the length of the room. The mountain of a man barely fit into the sleeveless, grease-stained green coveralls that he wore. "But I'm on the other side of the room," Andy said. "And besides, I might have an idea if I can just reach that vent up there." He climbed onto the large metal conference table in the center of the sterile white room. He dug around in the multitude of empty pockets of his utility vest in search of something. "I'll be damned if they didn't even leave me so much as a pair of tweezers." "Better listen to Big Willie, man. You know he doesn't like to be cooped up," Trey added. The large man leaned the cold metal chair back against the wall, crossed his muscular tree-trunk-sized arms, and pulled his gray beanie cap over his eyes. "Just 1 second, Andy said. "Let me look at—" "Dude, what the hell is wrong with you?" Tiffany nervously fidgeted with the tips of her nails. She blew out from the corner of her mouth at a loose wisp of hair, then chewed and blew a decent-sized bubble with her gum that popped and covered the tip of her button nose. "Do you want them to come in here and hogtie every freaking one of us? Just saying, 'cause that's what they do, isn't it?" Big Willie closed his eyes and drew in slow, deep breaths. His fists clenched with the pace of each breath, knuckles white with each contraction. "Calm down, big guy," Krista said. "Contain the bear. Become the butterfly." "Andy!" Melanie shouted from beneath her reproduction Superman baseball cap, then lifted it, glaring in Andy's direction. "Get your ass off of that table and sit down right now." She quickly stood, straightening the blouse of her nurse's scrubs, her self-imposed cafeteria uniform, and began looking around for something to throw at Andy. "Since Cap ain't here, that puts Willie in charge," Fergus said matter-of-factly. He scratched at the 2 days' worth of stubble along his neck, then straightened his thick brown 70s-style mustache. "Violation of a direct order is a punishable offense per the ship's charter." He gently stroked the mousy brown hair of the ship's pilot, Rachel, who lay napping in his lap. He adjusted her brown leather flight jacket that covered her still form. "Now, sit your ass down before you wake Rachel. You know she gets batshit crazy if she doesn't get a rest. Do you really want to send her spiraling off down a manic rabbit hole?" "Fine." Andy jumped down from the table and stumbled against the wall. "Don't come asking me for help when they come to execute all of us." "Everyone just sit down and shut up." Big Willie slammed both of his ham-sized fists down on the metal table, leaving 2 distinct indents on its surface. "Tansy cakes with peppermint cream," Rachel said. She snorted and jerked awake from her light doze. A crying scream erupted from the corner of the room. "It'll be all right, sweetie," Maggie, one of the witch's 3, said soothingly as she hurried past Big Willie. Her multicolored skirt flowed in a flurry of motion and jingles as she rushed to Amanda's side at the rear of the room. She pulled the young crewman close, cradling her to her bosom. Kara quickly finished retying her curly dark locks up in a headscarf, then sandwiched Amanda between herself and Maggie. "It's okay, baby. Willie is just a big, mean bully," she said in a cuddling baby tone. She adjusted her button-down shirt to cover her otherwise normally displayed cleavage. "Oh my Jesus fucking Christ, people," Krista huffed. She stood and looked around at the others. "We are all good, no one is hurt, and nearly everyone is here. Once Doug finds out that we've been arrested, he'll come to bail us out. It isn't like this is the first time any of us have been thrown in a lockup." A loud humming clack emanated from the room's heavy-duty steel door. It swung open, thudding against the concrete wall, and bounced back as Doug stumbled headlong into the room. "Cap!" The group stood simultaneously. "You better watch yourself. I like it rough," Doug said. He grinned and winked at the guard who shoved him further into the room. "Hey now!" Wes stumbled through the doorway just as a guard began pulling the door closed. "You could have at least left me my smokes, assholes." Doug kicked at the door as it latched closed. "Oh my God, Wesley!" Kara squeaked. She dove into Wes's arms, latching onto his husky frame. "My dear sweet teddy bear, they didn't hurt you, did they?" Doug scanned the room, mentally counting heads. "Missing Liz." He flashed a look of concern at the geek. "Don't look at me," Wes said defensively. "It wasn't my fault. She knew what she was getting into when we set up this plan." Doug rubbed his chin slowly and thought. "Just gotta hope for the best at this point, I suppose." He suddenly sighed, eyes fixed on the 2 large dents in the table. Do I even need to guess what happened to the table?" "That's in the past," Krista said with a wave of her hand as she walked up to Doug. "All done and over with. Nothing to worry about now." "Have they said anything to any of you yet?" Doug looked to Willie. "Nothing yet," Willie started, but was abruptly cut off. "None of us have been charged with anything," Krista said. "We were hauled in one by one and tossed into this room." Her eyes narrowed as she looked from Doug to Wes and back again. "I'm as clueless as you," Doug said. "The guy in the suit that brought us in just said that the ship was impounded and we were all under arrest." "Hell, that's a lot better than what happened to me," Trey said. "The last thing I remember, I was on my last set of squats, and boom, I went black. Next thing I know, I wake up here on the floor with a killer headache and Amanda crying in the corner." "Is everyone else okay?" Doug scanned the faces of the crew. He saw no obvious sign of injury or harm to any of them, then looked directly at Willie. "How are your fists?" "They'll be fine, Cap," Willie said reluctantly. "Can't say as much for that table." Doug pulled out the nearest chair and sat. The crew gathered around him. "Anyone hear from Liz before you were arrested?" Mumbled no's accompanied headshakes of the crew. "Good. Maybe she'll be able to work her magic from the outside and get us released." Fergus sat on the edge of the table. "So, what's the plan, Cap?" Doug leaned the chair back and placed his hands behind his head. He closed his eyes in a brief moment of contemplation. "There isn't one," Doug said. "It would be suicide to try and escape this compound. We haven't been charged with anything yet, and Liz is still unaccounted for. The best plan that I can see is that, for now, we wait. Let the Alliance goons play their cards, and we go from there." A loud humming clack emanated from the door once again. 4 heavily armed and armored guards entered the room, followed by a small, balding man in a black suit. "Speak of the devil," Doug hissed. He leapt to his feet and turned to face the balding man. "How are all of you this evening?" the small man asked, his voice soft and timid. "My name is W.J. Lepetamain, Director of the Independent Alliance. I hope that your stay hasn't been too unpleasant." Doug shook his head in disbelief. "Did you just say Director of the Alliance?" "Yes, I did," the director said with a matter-of-fact smile. "And unless I am terribly mistaken, you would be Captain Rackham, I presume?" "I am," Doug replied. He glanced over at the director. "Why are we being held without charges?" "My dear boy," the director laughed under his breath as he reached for one of the occupied seats at the table. "May I?" Doug nodded for Fergus to move and sat back down in his seat at the table. "You see, Captain Rackham," the director continued as he took the seat, "that is one reason that I admire you. You are direct and methodical, but you easily sway with the winds of change as the landscape begins to shift." The director held his right palm over his shoulder. The nearest guard produced a small hollow scroll that he extended as he placed it in the director's hand. The director cleared his throat and held up the clear sheet. Digital text scrolled upward with a swipe of his finger. He tapped the page with his finger to stop the scrolling, then began to read. "I, W.J. Lepetamain, Director of the Independent Alliance, its subsidiaries, and all non-entity subcontractors, to be referred to as the Independent Alliance as a whole from this point forth, hereby charge the following persons with crimes against the Independent Alliance, its employees, its property holdings and or possessions, equipment, or infrastructure." The crew all shifted nervously as an angry awkwardness permeated the room. The sound of hard heels on tile echoed through the open security door from the hallway beyond the room. The director relaxed in his chair. A large smile crossed his face as he closed his eyes. Liz stepped into the doorway and stopped in surprise. Whispered gasps of "Liz" leapt from each crew member's lips. A look of concern painted her face as her gaze darted around the room to each member of the crew. Her expression melted to utter surprise at the sight of the bald man seated next to Doug. She leaned against the doorframe, the curve of her hips accentuated by her stance. She crossed her arms and nearly pushed her breasts out of the black leather corset. The uniformed men that surrounded her were visibly distracted, a stolen glance here, an uncomfortable bulge there.
Why go to so much fuss, WJ? It has to be something insanely dangerous, or it could be stupid for you to drag the entire crew in like this.
The director remained motionless in his seat. He took a deep nasal breath, as if coming out of meditation.
Hello, Elizabeth,
the director said.
I see that you still favor cinnamon and cedar. Don't go getting all mushy and nostalgic on me,
Liz said.
I asked you a question, WJ.
The crew gawked at Liz with looks of utter disbelief painting each of their faces. Wait, the two of you actually know each other? Doug turned in his seat to face Liz with a look of surprised confusion.
It's a very long story, but yes,
Liz said. Director Lepidamine sat up straight, then turned sideways in the chair.
You look as lovely as ever, Elizabeth.
He admiringly smiled at her.
Don't try to butter me up, WJ. What gives? Can a man not bask in the memories of what once was?
The director smiled a knowing smile.
I know you better than that, Director,
Liz said with pointed emphasis.
You want something, and on top of that, you know that I'm the only one that can give it to you.
Liz glared at the director.
On so very many levels, my dear,
he said in a soft tone.
Cut this shit, WJ,
Liz growled.
What do you want with us?
The director sighed.
Very well, Elizabeth, if that is the way that you would prefer it.
He turned back in his chair and resumed reading the holoscroll.
Elizabeth Judith Trower, a.k.a. Liz, a.k.a. Deborah Hickman, a.k.a. Tracy Johnston, a.k.a. Ava Tudor, a.k.a. Brianna Weiss. You are hereby charged with extortion, kidnapping, attempted assault with a farm animal, tax evasion, defamation, espionage, and treason against the Independent Alliance.
The director handed the holoscroll back over his shoulder to the nearest guard, then laced his fingers together. He callously examined the crew.
We have enough charges against each of you for immediate execution, for which I just happen to have the execution orders right here.
He reached into his jacket and produced an order of execution that he handed over to Doug. Doug glanced over the document, then placed it on the table. He leaned forward, his face in his hands, as he vigorously rubbed his eyes. Then he looked up at the director. So, what's the catch? If you wanted us dead, we wouldn't even be here. Your goon squads could have picked each of us off without any of this dog and pony show. You want something. The director laughed with joyous delight.
I do so love that about you, Captain Rackham. Direct and to the point, even in the face of utter destruction. Misdirection, tedium, or shall I say, fluff, are in no way part of your personality. You are a very unique man, Captain. And you are also correct. My men could have easily taken each one of you out, and you would never have known what had happened.
Then, to the point, if you would, please, Doug said. The director smiled wide, then turned in his seat back to Liz.
Please, my dear, would you grace us with your presence? You know how I dislike speaking over my shoulder, and this does involve you quite a bit, I do believe.
The director looked to the soldier by the door.
Sergeant, if you would be so kind as to leave us and close the door behind you, please.
The sergeant scowled at the director. I'm not so sure that is a good idea, sir.
Rest assured, Sergeant, I am in no danger,
the director said.
Isn't that right, Elizabeth? Fine, WJ. Whatever suits your fancy.
She strode into the room and took a seat on the edge of the table.
My dear.
The director beamed as the hum of the magnetic locks re-engaged behind the soldiers leaving the room. He breathed deeply of her uniquely spiced perfume. Director? Doug prompted.
Oh, yes,
the director said, composing himself. He straightened his jacket and turned his attention back to Doug.
I am terribly sorry. To the point, then, shall we?
He creepily smiled at Doug and continued.
We have gathered intelligence on a new prototype technology that the Martian Reich has been developing for some time. However, we are not certain of that technology's current stage of development. My offer is simple. Gather all information, schematics, and details that you are able to obtain, and eradicate all data that is in the hands of the Reich on this technology by any means necessary.
Ha! Oh my God, really? That's it? That's all you want?
Trey chuckled. It's a freaking suicide mission, Cap. Just shoot me now and get it over with. Hold on, Trey, Doug said. You still haven't answered my question, Director. Why us?
Bambalam, whoa, black kitty, bambalam, whoa, black kitty,